Every year, millions of people venture into natural history museums to see dinosaur skeletons like these. What they see are the remains of marvelous animals that lived millions of years ago. What they don't see are all the processes involved to breathe life into these ancient bones. Join me now for a brief glimpse behind the scenes to see the real science of paleontology. When it comes to the excavation of fossils, the first thing you gotta do is find them.
Well, we always have a clue as to where we look. First of all, we need to find the right age rocks. And after we find the right age rocks, we have to find exposures that are in badlands. And badlands are simply rock exposures that have little to no vegetation. So we're out here walking around, and once you start walking around, if you don't know much about the formation, it is basically luck. You just walk everywhere and you look everywhere you can find, and then eventually you'll start finding specimens.
Rock and roll.
As the sediment erodes, you'll get pieces of bone eventually stick out of the side of the hill. Then we'll simply dig into that area and see if there's more bones in the hill. Otherwise, we'll move on to find something else.
Fortunately, you don't have to cross the world to find new species of dinosaurs. We're finding them right here in the state of Utah. Before you can remove the bones from the ground, you have to map every single bone in its place, because we're trying to reconstruct an entire ancient ecosystem, not just collect a bunch of dinosaur bones. We have to know how the bones lie relative to each other. We take notes on what the rocks were like. Are there any other fossils found with the dinosaur bones? All of this is information that's absolutely vital to actually doing science with the fossils. There is so much information that comes out of the ground as we collect the specimen. After finding a skeleton, we have to dig it up. First, you need to remove the rock layer above the bones, and then the bones themselves. And that's the hard one. We use everything from jackhammers to dental picks when it comes to digging up dinosaurs. First the jackhammers to remove the layer above the bones, and then the finer hand tools, brushes, and dental picks to actually get down to the bone layer.
So we have here a quarry, a dinosaur quarry, where we've collected part of the remains of a ceratopsian or horned dinosaur. So far we've recovered about 60% of the animal in various parts spread throughout this hill that we've taken down. Jelle, our volunteer from the Netherlands, is sweeping off the surface so that we can see if any bones are coming out. Bucky is working to take a bone out. He's slowly picking off the matrix or rock surrounding the bone and carefully sweeping it so that we can put caps on these bones and collect them.
We don't actually dig a bone out completely. We leave it surrounded in rock. In fact, sometimes we collect large blocks with a whole lot of bones and rock in them.
I'm separating it from two different bones. There's a rib, and that's coming under here. It goes right underneath the specimen here where I'm sweeping.
Yeah.
And then we get out the plaster and the burlap.
And what we're doing is getting ready to put some protective caps on the ends of this tibia so that it won't fall apart when we try to trench it. All I'm going to do is put a layer of paper over this to keep the jacket from sticking to that. We still need to remove more rock, but we can't really safely remove any more rock until these ends are protected, because you can see they're pretty crumbly.
So you can see it's up on a pedestal, and I'm cutting underneath the pedestal and creating this overhang so that we can put a more substantial plaster jacket on it.
It'll wrap all the way around and keep the specimen from flipping out of the bottom when we turn it over.
Then it'll be really well surrounded and protected, and we'll be able to flip it over. And we collect it and bring it back.
Despite all these advances in technology in the last century or so, paleontology is still done virtually the same way. We still excavate with the same kinds of tools, and we still wrap them up in plaster and burlap, and now we got to get them off the hill. Even getting back to the truck is basically done the same way. For the most part, it's muscle power. If something is really big and it's far from a road, well, we might have to hire a helicopter to help us pull it out. But the great majority of the time, it's just a bunch of people trying to haul these things back to the museum. Once the bones come back to the museum, they go into the prep lab and the jackets are removed so we can get to these fossils and see what's inside. They use a whole series of tools, things like those dental picks and a number of power tools to get rid of the rock and expose the bone.
Just have to be careful, because when we're working close to these edges, we don't want to damage them.
This is a typical example of a bone. You'll see a lot of it has like the mud and the matrix still in it, and this is an example of a clean bone.
Often the person who prepares the bones is different than the person who collects them. So it's a brand new experience for them too. It's like having that discovery feeling all over again. For every hour spent working in the field, sometimes dozens of hours are spent working in the preparation lab, getting those bones ready to go into the collection. All the bones are broken into pieces. They have to be glued back together. We try and keep the bones together as much as we possibly can, but sometimes we have to pull them apart, glue the edges, and put them back into place.
And this bone would take me at least a good 6 hours to make really clean. So something like this will take months. It's not uncommon for someone to work on a jacket for close to a year or more.
First of all, the turtle shell was deformed when it was fossilized. So to get it glued back together when there are great huge bends in it is a real challenge. But most of the pieces are here, and that's unusual. So in the process of getting the dirt out of each one of these cracks and gluing it back together, it's changed shape. And right now we're trying to make those shapes sort of go together as best we can.
This is a backbone of an Allosaurus. What I'm doing here is scribing the overburden, or what they call matrix, off the bone. And then this is the actual part of the bone where the crust has been removed. Yeah, but the bone is very fragile, and it's difficult. Once you get the crust off, some of the bone pops off.
Every bone is fragile, even once it's all glued back together. These are dinosaur bones. They're millions of years old, so we put them in a protective coating, whether it goes on a large shelf or into a small drawer. Once a specimen is prepared in the lab, it's time to move it down into the collection. Information is recorded with its own number, a specimen number. Who found the bone, the date that it was found, where it was found, the rock formation that it was found in. All that information is collected, so it's very useful for people coming to study these fossils. Scientists coming to the museum can go and study any specimen in our collection, any one of the thousands that they want to. And this is absolutely key because scientists going down and looking at those specimens see those bones with new eyes and new ways of thinking, and sometimes the most important discoveries are made right there inside the museum. If it's a particularly important fossil, something brand new to science, that specimen becomes what we call a holotype. Holotype specimens are specimens that belong to a brand new species.
Well, it's a different species that's ever been found before, and so to come here from Utah is very exciting because it's a relatively unexplored part of the country. Scott came here had a theory that he would find new species down there if he started looking. Well, the very first year we found this, and it's apparently new. So I think his theory is pretty sound.
Unlike most sciences, paleontology requires literally an army of people to really get the work done. A lot of those people are volunteers, and they're absolutely critical to our operation.
We're the first ones to see these naked bones.
Some are, college level, all the way up to senior level. In the dinosaur class, you're required to come in here and do the fossil prep, and it was really interesting, and I got to use the AirScribe.
But it's fun, keeps you out of trouble.
Most of them come just because they enjoy it.
And these volunteers put in hundreds of hours a year helping us bring these bones back to life. We're not just out here headhunting, trying to find skeletons that we can put on exhibit, but we want to know how these animals lived, how they died, what it was like back then. And to answer those questions, we have to collect clues from every source that we can, in the rocks, in the bones, in the plant fossils that we find, to try and reconstruct the entire environment. In the long run, it's well worth it. We get a glimpse into ancient worlds.
This is broadcast of Emergency Plaster System.